You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Welcome to First Contact, a podcast very slowly exploring the new worlds of Star Trek The Next Generation. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This week we have watched The High Ground. It was written by Melinda M. Snodgrass, directed by Gabrielle Beaumont, and it first aired the week of January 29th, 1990. James, what is this one all about?
While the Enterprise is delivering medical supplies to Rutia IV, Dr. Crusher gets kidnapped by a terrorist group. They use a new form of dimensional transporter which makes them impossible to trace. In the meantime, the Doctor finds that the terrorists are killing themselves with their new technology and finds some common ground with their charismatic leader. Eventually, the boffins on the Enterprise work out how to trace the transporter signal and Crusher is rescued, but not before we've had a sensitive exploration of freedom fighting.
Alex, you hadn't seen this episode before. What did you think of it?
Well, I mean, an episode essentially dealing with the morals of terrorism and essentially a bit of a sort of thinly drawn take on the troubles in Northern Ireland, which is actually a subject that I did for my degree at university. I wrote a big, long paper on the troubles in Ireland and the history of it, and about what each side's arguments were. So you'd think, really, that I was well placed to really enjoy this week's episode. Instead, I was bored shitless.
Oh. I've got to say, I think that this episode is not good, and not good in very many ways. Firstly, the production design. We start on this very boring planet again. Sort of.
We're in another hotel lobby, basically.
It is. These...
And so, to the extent that I said when they're walking across, I bet he's just about to go and drop in on their meal. And then that's exactly what happened.
So, yeah, we've got all these sort of dull, overlit white pillars, and we've got these aliens with a white stripe through their hair. They're not humans, they've got this stripe in their hair. Right? Fine.
Like badgers.
Badgers aren't human.
And then the officials, who are space cops. It's just all looks horrible, which gets you off on quite a bad start. And then you have this massively sort of first-year student exploration of terrorism. The dialogue is just appallingly bad. It's so simplistic, and it just doesn't ever get to the nub of anything. The ideas are not explored in any kind of satisfying way. It's just massively frustrating, and as you say, it's boring.
I kind of disagree a little bit, because I didn't actually find this episode boring. I thought it was okay, which is kind of a bit condescending. And I'm going to be even a bit more condescending now, because I'm going to treat the episode like a child that's just drawn a picture of a dog and say, well done, that's a dog, isn't it? Because I think it's admirable that they tried to do an episode like this, and they didn't go down the easy route, because in season 1 you would have had Finn be this amazing charismatic leader. I don't know, we describe him as charismatic, but really he would have been the most handsome, tall, blonde-haired god of a man, and Crusher would have fallen in love with him in season 1. But they make him unlikable, even though we're meant to sympathise with him to some extent. So I think that they didn't go down the easy route, even if it didn't end up working all that well.
I just don't think it worked at all. I mean, really, for me, the episode was summed up 1 minute into its runtime when Crusher turns around and says, I need some bandages, disinfectant, something with alcohol in it. I thought, you and me both. It was It was just. It's like you say, Andrew. It felt very simplistic, and it did that thing that TNG is sometimes guilty of, which is that it starts analysing an issue, but instead of coming down on one side of the fence or the other, it just decides to drop out of the issue altogether. I don't want to oversimplify it and say it should come down one way or the other, because there's a lot of grey there, and the thing is, if you're going to go with that kind of simplistic exploration of it, then you kind of expect it to fall one way or the other, even if that's sort of a bit condescending. But to sort of drop out of it, you kind of expect it to be explored a bit more first.
But that's why I think that this is better than what we had in Season 1, because it would have came across as condescending in Season 1, because they would have came down on one side of the issue and smashed the issue over our heads, just bashing us repeatedly, telling us terrorism is wrong or terrorism is okay, whichever one they've decided that week.
I'd love to see the week where they decided that terrorism was okay. We're all terrorists this week.
Data Explorer's being a terrorist.
Shut up, Wesley. We're all terrorists this week.
The point is that terrorists can be fighting for a noble cause, and you can go down the route of the means don't justify the ends, but the ends are noble, and in fact they do it in later Star Trek. They have the Maquis, who appear in Next Generation, Deep Space Nine and Voyager, who are terrorists who attack the Federation and the Cardassians over a disagreement over the treatment of the Bajorans, and that's pretty well done, even though they abandon it pretty quickly in both Deep Space Nine and Voyager.
I think you've hit the nail on the head, though, when you said the word issues. This is an issue show, and I don't really care about them coming down on either side or actually making that proper moral argument and coming to a conclusion about the use of terrorism or freedom fighting or whatever side you want to come down on in that. It's that I was not engaged. I didn't sympathise with either side. I didn't think it was a good episode of television, first and foremost. You can have the intellectual exploration, you can have the arguments, you can have the debates, but it's another planet I'm not invested in, I don't care about it, I don't really care about Crusher's plight, I never felt she was in any kind of peril, I don't sympathise with the terrorist, I don't really listen to his treatise, I don't really even know what's going on the planet. Somebody told us at one point, and it's just like, there's a coast and they have to separate and these people I don't know and I don't care, and that is just a big problem, which makes it as bad as Season 1, because I'm not engaged. It's juvenile and it's dull.
It doesn't help that a lot of our characters have been hit with the stupidity ray as well. I mean, so like, just in that first scene, the bomb's gone off and Worf turns around and basically says to Data, well, thank God there's not another bomb or something bad to happen. And then something bad happens. It's just, really?
Well, even before that, you had the stupid Ray with Picard saying in his captain's log that shore leave hasn't been cancelled, they just have to go down and be pretty careful and have phasers. They couldn't just decide to, cancel shore leave and just go onto the holodeck instead?
We're going to Butlins this week, but it might be a bit risky. Take a gun.
I suppose the one thing that does make it slightly interesting is this exploration of the Federation as this neutral party with non-Federation planets. And we've had that before, very poorly dealt with.
But I think it's been dealt with better before. It was poorly dealt with before, but this is worse.
Oh, I was thinking of something like Angel 1, which,
okay, fair point.
I don't think you can take any credit away from, but this, they have a trade agreement with this planet, but they're not part of the Federation. They can bring medical supplies, but they can't help them with weapons. And is that interesting, or is it just purely incidental? I thought, there might be something going on there, but ultimately it doesn't come to anything, does it? So
It seems more. The episode seems more preoccupied in a way with the hostage situation than the issue. Or maybe that's just how I felt about it. I don't know.
But I think that's understandable considering we're seeing it from the Federation's perspective.
But from a writing perspective, it does mean that what we were saying before about the issue getting a bit glossed over in places and becoming quite a simple exploration of it, it does sort of make it a bit worse in places.
It goes back to the fact that they can only do 45-minute episodic stories. You know, if they're going to tackle a subject like this, then it's something that you need a longer storyline for. And in fact, that's why they introduce a longer storyline later on in Star Trek, broadly on the topic of terrorism.
I mean, the way that I thought this was kind of going to go, as a way of exploring the issue, was that you have Crusher, she's been kidnapped, but that over time she comes to understand their point of view, while at the same time you have Riker with the other team, and he comes to understand their point of view, and because they've both been completely separated, you have a clash, and that's the climax of the episode. Which is a very simplistic way of dealing with those stories. We've seen it done 100 times in 100 different shows, but that seemed to be the way it was going. And I can't decide if the fact that it didn't go down that road is a good thing or a bad thing.
Well, I suppose the one thing we can be grateful for is it didn't go down the road of Crusher falling in love with the sexy terrorist man.
Or Riker falling in love with the sexy leader.
Or Troy falling in love with Wesley. There's some very tender looks going on that couch.
But they did actually sort of go there when Picard eventually gets kidnapped, and I suppose we'll get onto that. And Crusher kind of stands up for these people and says, oh, they might have a point. But that comes out of nowhere. You don't get the impression throughout the episode that she is coming to sympathise, or she is learning anything about them, or we're finding anything deeper about how they might have been wronged and what they're actually fighting for. It's more that this guy has a son and he likes doing creepy drawings.
It's a very simplistic examination in the sense of it's sort of all you hit them. Yeah, man, they hit me first. Really? But don't worry, I can draw you. See, I'm not all bad.
I have other talents other than blowing people up.
Draw you like one of my French girls.
I feel the episode is summed up by the scene with Data, where he says, is terrorism always bad, Captain? And Picard goes, well, we don't really know, do we? But that's what we're trying to find out this week. Ah, okay. Let me list some causes where terrorism has been effective. Right, okay, that'll probably get this episode banned in the UK if you do that. Yeah, well, I'm going to go with it anyway. And it's just the worst kind of after-school special Star Trekking. I just don't understand it. It's talking to the camera almost.
Just 8 more years until the reunification of Ireland, guys. Not long to go now.
Yeah, but the way that they talked about it suggested that there was some kind of major terrorist incident that led into that, aside from the rest of the troubles. Which, you know, considering the, alright, not stable state of affairs, but much more stable than they have been, Christ.
So let's talk a little bit about the MacGuffins, shall we? So, you've got a dimensional transporter, which is untraceable and also kills you. What was the point in that?
To show that they are going to great lengths.
Well, they only find out quite late on that it's killing them. By which point, well, we're all probably a bit poisoned now. It's basically the equivalent of turning around saying, those fags are killing you. But, you know, you've been a 40-a-day man for at least 50 years. Oh, really? Christ. Well, I suppose I might as well just keep smoking now.
It's shorthand for saying, oh, they will go to any lengths to fight for their cause. But they don't seem that reasonable. They're just blowing people up in general. I don't know. I don't... like I say, I'm not really bothered. I don't know if a better central performance. Not that I think he was bad. Richard Cox as Kyril Finn, so memorable. But I just...
I only remembered his name because it was the same name as the guy from the new Star Wars.
I just don't really know what would make me invested in this episode, if it was flat direction or if it was just the writing. I think ultimately it comes back to a bad script. It was Michael Piller, we mentioned when he came on board, said it should be about something and a character should change. And it's about something, but it's not about anything in the right way. It's about terrorism. Go write an essay on it. And does Crusher go through any kind of change? Does she go through any emotional journey? Do we learn anything about humanity? No, I don't think we do. Conclusion, D.
I mean, surely this episode, as much as any other in the whole run so far, surely this is the time for some of those negotiations that Picard is so fond of. And a bit of mediation.
You think this episode will be improved by a negotiation?
No, but I don't think I can improve it, frankly. But, I mean, purely in terms of the issue that it's choosing to deal with. I mean, if we go back a few weeks to an episode that really hasn't stuck in my mind, we had that episode where there was a negotiation that started and we never saw the outcome of it. And it was entirely incidental to the episode. If that had been how you finish here, it would make more sense. You don't need to see the outcome of the negotiation. The victory is in getting people round a table. That would be the satisfying ending, in a way. And they kind of try to do something here with the idea at the end of, hey, that child didn't try and kill me, so, that's something. Which is... It's assuming quite a lot there. It's assuming that they are on a planet full of murderous children. Somewhat the equivalent of Battle Royale.
That would be more interesting, wouldn't it? The terrorists use their children as bombs. I'd watch that episode.
Oh, what, like dogs in World War II?
But they do actually use the children as terrorists. There's a teenager who blows up somebody. That's mentioned in this episode, isn't it?
But it was so incidental, it didn't dwell on any of our minds. I think, again, one of those situations of being shown something is far more effective at times than being told it.
If only we were shown a bus full of children being blown up, we could have understood.
Well, I don't mean to be harsh, but yeah, kind of. What we saw was essentially a hotel lobby where a few people got blown about a bit.
And then a cave.
And we've seen that a lot of times before. And to ask us to believe that it's a far more hideous situation than in any of those other occasions is a little bit of an ask, to be honest. Because then everything else is essentially done in dialogue, more or less.
Yeah. And it's not good dialogue. This episode has actually made me angry. I think that's why it's worst. It's that secondary infection of it trying too hard to say something.
And when they do try and justify it in dialogue, you get these really weird results. So, I mean, there's the one in particular about... essentially, going back to what you were talking about, they talk about, oh no, there was a school bus, 60 school children, all blown up. They said that they were trying to aim for the police, but got the wrong target. And then that's just glossed over. How the hell did that happen? Because to me, that seems really weird.
The one I actually wrote down was, you should be drawing, not killing people. I can do both. Like, what does that even mean? Wesley, he gets something to do. I'd forgotten about Wesley. I'd forgotten he was even there. He's not done a lot recently, but he gets to find the dimensional shift transporter technology.
Yeah, at the same time, he's perhaps not as active as you may expect in an episode where his mother has been kidnapped.
Not really. He says, good luck to Worf.
He wants to be on the away team, to be fair.
That's true. The other good thing I quite liked was, the science team. You've got Wesley, Geordie, and Data sitting in engineering. They're in engineering, having a meeting, talking about how to do things in engineering. I liked that. They used engineering this week. And when the terrorists broke in, they put a bomb on the warp core.
And Geordie did the most amazing thing I've ever seen in all of Star Trek, diving away from that phaser shot. Which I think that is my single favourite moment in any Star Trek ever made.
I don't know. It's got a long way to go to beat Picard's fight later on. I mean, that was truly something.
Well, they wanted to give the captain more action, and they did that. So he got to beat up a guy before getting taken away in the transporter. I was quite happy to see that. I was quite excited to see that. But again, the direction, it's some of the worst use of, stopping the camera, getting him out of the way, and then Worf wanders really slowly into shot.
Worf just stands there and then gets shot. That is amazing.
The action direction is very poor. It needed to be a bit more kinetic, and
having Picard in an action scene at this stage just seems so odd, to the extent that I have to wonder if it was a request from Patrick Stewart, like later on when Patrick Stewart will say, "I like driving buggies, could we write a buggy into this script?" That essentially he's turned around and said, I'd like to be a bit more actiony. No, okay, Patrick, maybe a gunfight? No, I'd like to be seen punching a man in the face.
I do think it was Patrick Stewart's request to have more action.
Punching a man in his face.
I'm sure I remember an interview. It said Michael Piller never went down to meet the cast or spent any time with them because he always got cornered by Patrick Stewart asking for more women and more action.
Hence the episode later on this season.
Does anyone have anything more they really want to add to this? Because I feel I'll just rant some more and no one wants to hear that.
I'm not angry at this episode. As I've said, they tried to do something admirable. They failed, but they tried, and I appreciate that.
I just feel like the whole they tried, but it was so fumbled, and the making everyone on every side so dislikable. I can see why you do it, but there has to be something. So, I mean, the woman that Picard, the woman Riker's with, who I can only describe as the woman that Riker's with because she was such a non-entity. I can't remember if she had a name.
She was called
our insight.
Alexana Devos.
The insight we're given into her is she's a bit sad because children died. But then anyone's a bit sad when kids die, really, aren't they? I mean, yeah, but the thing is, she says she's moderate, but the way that she's playing it is slightly Gestapo, which makes you question everything that she says.
But I feel they're kind of just using children dying as a very cheap shorthand to I have a just cause, because you have Finn's son died. Grrr, he's angry about that. It's really sad. It's a sad backstory, so therefore we must sympathise with him as well. And shrug, I don't care.
I just sympathised with him because, at stages when he looked really tired, he just looked like a poor man's Bob Geldof tribute. It's just reason to feel sorry for anyone, really.
See, when we first encounter Finn, and he keeps trying to feed Dr. Crusher, did anyone else find that a little strange? He's just, eat something. Go on, eat something. No, I've just had lunch, really, I'm fine. Eat something. There's no point in not eating something. Eat something. Yeah, you'll like that. I've just eaten something. It's good.
Like some sort of halfway house between the scene with the chocolate cake in Matilda and 9.5 weeks. Anyway,
let's go over to Quickfire.
Quickfire.
So, as is par the course, I suppose, at this stage, I did turn to the Nitpicker's Guide for Next Generation Trekkers. But I was slightly perplexed by it this week. I mean, normally it bangs on about some issue with continuity or something along those lines, and to be fair, it still does that. But then it gets into this bizarre diatribe where it says, I can remember a programme several years ago when a popular talk show host exclaimed, "Who can give me a definition of terrorism?" He wanted to show that any definition of terrorism can work equally well as a military conflict. I disagree, and I offer this definition. Terrorism is the systematic targeting of non-military targets for the sole purpose of evoking a negative emotional response from the populace. The purpose of terrorism is not military conquest. The purpose of terrorism is to devalue the commitment of a people towards their government's position. By this definition, planting a bomb on a commercial airliner is terrorism. Filling a truck full of explosives and running into an American military installment in Beirut, however, is not. That is a military attack. Keep it light, guys. You're only 168 pages in. Also, what talk show suddenly goes into who can give me a definition of terrorism?
It's probably Kilroy.
Terrorists. Do we share with them or shaft them?
So this episode was not shown in the UK or Ireland because the idea of a peace treaty existing between the two was quite controversial at the time. It only aired on the BBC on 29th of September 2007 with the Ireland reference intact. It has aired on Sky, but usually has been edited. It's still never been shown on RTE in Ireland.
It's aired on Sky, but then what hasn't at this stage?
I hope they advertised it on the BBC in September 2007 as a brand new episode of Star Trek The Next Generation.
Oh, only 15 years late. We forgot about this one. It was on the floor.
This episode was shown as part of the Cathedral Quarter Arts Festival in Belfast in May 2007. So it's a piece of art. That's what it is.
Is it?
Yeah. It was shown at an arts festival. How could it not be art at an arts festival?
This episode marks the first appearance of the darker blue carpet on the bridge. That's going to remain there until the end of the show, causing some continuity issues in the final episode, but we'll get onto that in many years.
There's really nothing to say about an episode when you're talking about the colour of the carpet.
The writers had quite a lot to say in the aftermath of this episode, with Ronald D. Moore describing it as an abomination. We didn't have anything interesting to say about terrorism except that it's bad and Beverly gets kidnapped. Ho hum. Michael Piller said, another show I wasn't particularly happy with. We set out to do a show about terrorists. What was the statement we made about terrorism in the show? Was it the point where the boy puts down the gun and says, maybe the end of terrorism is when the first child puts down his gun? Brandon Braga said, very rarely do we start thinking about an episode in terms of an issue. Let's do a show about AIDS. Let's do a show about terrorism. That's exactly what you do all the time. We rarely think in those terms. We usually think in terms of neat science fiction twists, and that's what sends us in the direction of what this story is and who's in it.
That is a load of bollocks. They always think like that. Let's do an episode about global warming. Let's do an episode about evolution. Let's do an episode about this and that. They always think like that.
Of course they do.
How can you say they don't?
And so Melinda Snodgrass, she was also unhappy because she was told to change her analogy to Northern Ireland. Originally, it was about the American Revolution, showing that the writer's room doesn't think in that way at all, ever. It never thinks like that. I wanted it with Picard as Cornwallis, and the Romulans would have been the French, who were in our revolution trying to break this planet away. Suddenly Picard realised he's one of the oppressors. Instead we do breakfast in Belfast. I don't even know what that means. Where our people decide they're going to go off to Northern Ireland. Fair enough. It didn't meet the original vision. Nobody thought it was good. And it didn't say anything. Great.
The Star Trek The Next Generation companion states, this story also provides this season's version of the ongoing tease of Beverly's interrupted confiding to Picard, begun in Arsenal of Freedom. What? Does it? What's that?
Right before they try to escape themselves, Beverly says, Sean, look, I have to tell you something. And then the lights go out and she doesn't tell him anything. It was a bit clunkily handled and it just doesn't work. And also, I don't think at this point anybody is really invested in that relationship anymore.
I didn't remember that even being a thing.
Well, that's because Gene Roddenberry didn't want it to be a thing.
Also, it's not really a quickfire point, but I am quite enjoying the caption that Star Trek Next Generation 365 has chosen to put with the photo it's got accompanying the episode, which has the caption, Post-Terrorist Mayhem.
Oh, those zany terrorists.
Sounds like so much fun.
Does it have an exclamation mark after it? On the video surveillance monitors in Alexana's office, several slightly modified images of Earth cities can be made out. One of them is an image of a building looking similar to the World Trade Center's Twin Towers in New York.
Well, that was another episode, one we all enjoyed. 5 stars. Next time we'll be talking about Deja Q, and we'll have a whole new round of puns for you. Until then, goodbye.
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 I googled breakfast in Belfast, but it's just telling me places where I can get breakfast in Belfast.
I don't know.
Featuring black and white pudding. That sounds like a racist joke. It's not, it's genuinely. That's the Irish breakfast.
18 brilliant breakfasts in Belfast. What better way to start the day than with a good hearty breakfast? Belfast specialises in Ulster Fry, but there are a host of places offering...
Ulster Fry, that's the one. That's the one with black and white pudding.